We got sound? I'm rolling. All right. My bad. This is an important presentation. We got two camera guys in here. Aftermarket games. So here's the deal. For those of you who may not know this, there are people out there right now who are actively making games for old systems. It's kind of like a niche thing, but with Kickstarter and some other things, I feel like more and more people are kind of starting to know about this. Like back in the, a couple of years ago, this was like, you had to be super nerd and really about Nintendo. But now like Kickstarter, people are doing like projects and then making a game as a side project or just funding a game, and it's kind of getting out there. So why am I doing this panel? Well, the thing is, it's like so new that there's no classification right now. And so what I'm trying to do is actually give this genre, some way to identify what's what. And I'm really into this. Let me see what else I got here. I'm Christian A. Dietering, a.k.a. Ferris Bueller on NintendoAge.com. It's a forum for Nintendo collectors. That's where I hang out. That was how I got into all this. So what is an aftermarket game? The definition I'm going with is it's a game made after the lifespan of a system. And then I've got a handful of different types down here, and I'm going to go through all these and explain what's what. You got reproductions, commonly known as repros. We've got a couple people out there that are selling them. I see SNES Unlimited, right? You guys got an entire table full of repros. And then you got hacks, which is somebody who really liked the game to the point that they have taken the time to go and change things in the game. Sometimes it's to make it harder. Sometimes it's just to change sprites out so that it's like goofier graphics or something like that. But you're just taking the original game and you're changing it in some way to make it a new thing. Translations, there are games that were released like over in Japan. A good example is Akira. That was a game that they got and was pretty cool, but it didn't make it over here. Another one, I'm not a big fan of Earthbound, but there's another one. The Earthbound that we know on Super Nintendo is actually part 2. There was a first part that was for Nintendo, and Nintendo of America went all the way to the point of like almost releasing it. They had done all the translation and they shelved it. So games like that we didn't see that release here, there's people out there that take the time to, take the Japanese version and get it into English and then release the ROM so that people can play it. Unreleased would refer to canceled projects. And I think that I actually do every single one of these. I'm probably talking too much, whatever. Unreleased is like a game that was being created and then for some reason, like they had to stop the project. Maybe the company went under or maybe licensing issues. Sometimes that would happen. You buy the rights to a movie, but you don't get the game out in time and then you lose the rights and it's like, oh, well, I guess my Spawn game isn't going to get released. I just made that up. I don't know if there's a Spawn game. And then Homebrews, which is, what kind of gets me all excited is a brand new game. This is somebody who loved Nintendo or Super Nintendo or Game Boy so much that they took the time to learn how to program in that language, and they have created something from scratch and then released it usually on their own. That's all changing now. It's kind of exciting, and I'll get to that later. And then there's random people who are doing really interesting things. A lot of it's music related. Chip tuners are coming out with crazy carts and then, synthesizers and things to plug into these systems so that they can create music using those systems. All right, so let's keep going. Who is this guy? Christian A. Dietering. Who cares? Who is he? What does he do? All right, so first and foremost, I'm a filmmaker and film buff. I'm also a collector/gamer. I am both at the same time. I'm pretty good at a handful of stuff. I'm also a lover and a long walk taker, but not always in that order. I'm Ferris Bueller on NintendoAge. That's where I spend a lot of my time. I'm branching out now. I just keep getting more and more involved in the gaming community, but that's kind of my home base. And I created the Aftermarket price guide. So that's where I track all these games that are being made. And it's the only sticky in the price check, which is a cool thing for me. It's really hard to get a sticky on that forum. You have to actually do something pretty substantial, and I managed to pull it off. And I made the Aftermarket price guide because of what I called the Gwyndian effect. Gwyndian is a guy who's on NintendoAge, and he was kind of like the big-time collector before I came along. And anytime somebody was selling something super rare, that, oh, there's only 5 copies made, and they'd be like, I'm thinking about selling my copy, how much is it? this guy Gwyndian would show up, and I'm friends with this guy, but still, like, it was kind of upsetting me back in the day. He would show up and be like, oh, that game hasn't sold in like 3 years. That's easily a $1,000 game. And it was like, where are you getting your data from? Like, you're arbitrarily saying that it's worth this amount, and I'm trying to buy this stuff, and you're totally hurting my chances of getting things. So I created the Aftermarket price guide. And what I've been doing is I've been tracking I've been tracking all these games that have been made. It's a pretty good list of everything that's been made for Nintendo after Nintendo quit doing it. And I track prices on like eBay, GameGavel. A lot of this stuff gets sold on NA because that's where a lot of these guys who are making these games hang out as well. So if you're really into this stuff, I suggest checking out NintendoAge. And then just like the price guide said, this applies to my presentation. Welcome to my completely imperfect Aftermarket games presentation. I'm just one man, and it's a ton of information. I'm always learning new stuff, too, so if I get something wrong, feel free to correct me afterwards so that I look good during the panel. Okay, so this is a little bit of my collection, my game room, my cabinet that I've got all my really cool stuff hanging out in. These are my setups, the M8 and the M8 II. You know, that's my full set. And before anybody asks me, no, I'm missing stadium events. That's the slot for if and when I ever get that game. That's the only one I'm missing. And then don't think about trying to figure out where I live or rob me. There is the eye in the sky. You think I'm crazy, but I had somebody break into my car outside, so I took the precaution of installing that. So disclaimer, what am I not talking about? And this is really important. Reproductions of a licensed game made in that same region. In other words, fakes. So what I'm not discussing here is somebody who is making a copy of Flintstones 2 just because Flintstones 2 is worth a lot of money. And I don't care if you're making Flintstones 2 for yourself or if you're making it to sell, which is even worse, because there are people out there now who are making these expensive games. It's a reproduction, you know, a fake of a game. And then because the real game sells for $1,000, well, this reproduction that I just made, I'm going to want $300 for it. That's insane. You should not be doing that. I hate this practice. Recently I saw somebody who did a reproduction of a test cart, and they wanted $500 for the reproduction of the test cart. Like, if you buy just like a normal, hey, SNES Unlimited, what are you guys selling a regular repo for? Okay, but I mean, like, what's the average price, though, for, like, something like that? $40, $50, yes. And to be fair, some things do cost more than others, and a lot of times it has to do with how much work it takes to make the board or the game. Some of them are really intense, like Final Fantasy II and 3J on the Nintendo require, you know, a giant board and save and all that stuff. So, like, it varies, but what they just said, you shouldn't really be paying more than a repro. So these people that are asking these astronomical prices, it's insane. It's just a cash grab. Watch out, you know, the fakes are getting out there now. The collecting in this hobby has gotten to the point where that's what we have to deal with now. It's kind of sad, but there it is. So disclaimer, yeah, a moissanite, it's Mickey Mouse, mate, spurious, not genuine, and it's worth. We're going to keep going. It's a Fugazi, a fake. You go ahead and sell if you want to look like a dumpski. I can't even remember what I got that movie from, but those are both movie quotes. So example, I just talked about this. These are games that people are now starting to make fakes of and then sell for outrageous prices. I don't agree with it. And so then this is just interesting. A lot of people are just calling them repros. Like, that's just the common term for them now. But what's really going on when people say repro, what they're really kind of talking about are bootlegs and pirates. I mean, back in the day, that's what that stuff would have been called. But with video game stuff, it's like taking this turn where we don't call it that. We call them repros, and it's very interesting. However, there are true repros, and so I was just going to kind of explain the difference between the two. A true repro, Cheetah Men 2, is a game that got re-released by Craig Pabbage. If you happen to remember, he did a giant Kickstarter. AVGN was on there. I think Pat the NES Punk was on there for his trailer. He actually bought the rights to the intellectual property for Cheetah Man 2, which meant he owned it, and then he reproduced the game. That's a true reproduction. He bought the rights to the thing, he redid it, and the release that he did, it was marked just a little bit different. So even then, it didn't look like the original one. There was a little bit that was different to it. That's a reproduction. Other examples, 3D Noah's Ark by Pico Interactive. The cool thing is, Pico Interactive is actually out there in the vendor hall. You can go buy the copy of 3D Noah's Ark from him today after my panel. And then the same thing, Sunday Fun Day by Infinite NES Lives. The same deal with them. They bought the rights to that game from the old company that was kind of defunct. But because of this stuff, like, they got to cash in again, you know, which is really crazy. It was 20 years later, you know, and then all of a sudden these people, you know, us, are starting to hit up these people that, like, kind of quit 20 years ago on making games, and now we're starting to buy the rights from them so that we can make them again, which is interesting because I'm waiting to see if Nintendo starts paying attention to what's going on. Is it possible that Nintendo could start making old games again too? Is the market there? I don't know. I'm just speculating. So here's my copies of the Cheetah Man and the creation. So these are his reproductions. Here's Sunday Fun Day. It was a reproduction. So, you know, they bought the rights to this game and then they redid it. But you see, here's the difference. They've got their stamp on it so that you can tell, you know, like, this wasn't the same one from back in the day. This is a new one. So here's what I was talking about earlier. What we're seeing is a semantic shift in the gaming community. The definition of the word repro is changing. And this is just like something I think is kind of cool because it was already in the lexicon, you know, reproduction, but it's changing. Like I was saying earlier, like it's this new area for us where it kind of means something different now. But so many people have adopted that term that I don't think there's any way to turn back. Like, I think repro is going to stick and you're never going to get away from that, you know. It's kind of a blanket catch-all, and that's why I'm kind of doing my panel, to try and separate and be like, no, repro doesn't capture everything. Aftermarket captures everything. Repro is a little more specific. So yeah, this change in the term of the words related both to linguistics and etymology. That's the study of languages and words. Check it out if you want to get smarter later on. All right, Ferris, seriously, can we get on to the good stuff? Okay, so why aftermarket? I kind of touched on that. It's all encompassing. It blankets everything that I'm trying to talk about. It's a good term. I really like it. When I did the first homebrew price guide, I called it the homebrew price guide, and people got mad at me because it was the same way as me saying it's a repro price guide. And then the homebrew guys were like, what about us? We're not a repro. And then it was the same thing when I said homebrew. People were like, don't lump repros in with homebrew. Homebrew takes more effort. And it was like, okay, so we need something to kind of differentiate or cover everything. And that was where I came up with aftermarket. Because when I called it the newly renamed Homebrew Repro Translation Unreleased Games that are either discontinued or limited edition price guide, I maxed out the title for the forum. Then the mods and the admins got really upset at me. So I had to come up with something that was shorter, and that's where we got the Aftermarket price guide. And Aftermarket wasn't my idea. That was, there's so many arguments that happen about this stuff. That was something I pulled from another guy where we were having this conversation about what do we call these things? And somebody said, well, you know, if these were cars, we would call it an aftermarket part. And I really liked it. I was like, oh, okay, there we go. That's something that I think can work. So when does the aftermarket begin? Technical definition, you could go two ways. It's either when the last game was made for the system, or it was either when service was suspended. So the Nintendo hotline, you could still call it up until the mid-2000s. And we're talking like if you wanted Nintendo to work on your Nintendo, I think up until like 2005, 2006, you could still call the service center number and somebody at Nintendo would pick up, and I think you could send your stuff in and they would fix it for you. But for the sake of my argument, I'm going to go with the last game made for the console. So the systems that I'm talking about right now, these are the ones for Nintendo that people are actively making stuff for, is the NES, the SNES, N64, Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, and Virtual Boy. Nobody's done N64 yet. I think it could happen because it's still a cart-based system. We'll see. I would love to see a homebrew on N64 because that means that somebody put a lot of work into it. But right now, this is what we're kind of limited to. So the end of the system, to give you an idea, here's the list of the last game made for each system. You can kind of see the dates. So this is about when that system ended and it was time to move on to the latest and greatest. So what came first? The first thing that I have, the oldest one that I can remember, is I've got a copy of Dig Dug. It was a reproduction. Dig Dug wasn't actually released for Nintendo here. We got Dig Dug 2. But over in Japan, they actually had Dig Dug. So this is probably the simplest thing back in the day. I doubt that they even had to translate anything. But I know that it is an old one because the labels don't look that good. They don't have the rounded corners. It's a hard diagonal where somebody cut it with scissors to make it fit so that it wasn't square. It's not a glossy label. It looks like paper. You know, if you got like a Super Nintendo cart where the label was made in Mexico, it's like paper, not glossy, and it fades and gets dirty real quick. That's kind of how this one was. And that's the first one that I have. And I got that, I want to say like 2006 or something like that. But I bought it from somebody who bought it in like 2000. So that's the oldest one I know. But I think it started with the repros. You know, people were tinkering around and trying to figure out how this system worked, and that was how they did it. They didn't just jump into it and start making new games. It was, let's take something that we know, already works, and let's see if we can switch it up a little bit and get it to work over here in America, like NTSC. Which I know is in Japan. That was a bad example. Let's say a PAL game. There you go. Smurfs or something, and then they wanted to play it in NTSC here. So then after that, I think, was probably the hacks, where now people have kind of figured out the code. You know, all right, we know how the system works a little bit, so let's see what we can get away with. And so then I think that was probably the next step, was kind of changing things. And then the translations, and then at some point, people started buying prototypes, and that's where the unreleased games came from. And that was, people finding a game that wasn't released and then working to make it available for everybody else. The other, I'm putting in there because I think that people were probably making these sound generators, and those tinkerers were doing that stuff. And then a culmination of everything that these guys did would eventually lead up to the Homebrew, which is a brand new game for the old system. All right, so what are they? We've got the types of carts. Repros, I talked about this. Right now it's kind of a blanket term. Could include hacks, could include translations. It's kind of like a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle isn't a square. It's not always going to work, but sometimes it does. And then an example of a true repro, I talked about Dig Dug, just something that wasn't released here that somebody brought over, so that we could play it on NTSC systems. And then hacks, all right? So a hack I talked about is taking a game and either turning it into something else or keeping the theme of the game and making it different or harder. So if you're like me and you're really, really good at Contra, then you might go out and hack Contra to increase the difficulty, because I think it's real easy. A lot of people have done that with like Mario, Super Mario 3. I'm sure you guys have seen all those impossibly hard videos or games that are out there. A good example of a hack is Denki Kang or Ares, if you don't know about that. These are both some games that kind of have some fame out there. If you don't know what Denki Kang is, there was this meme that was around the internet. This video game character is blue, collects rings, and goes fast. And then there's the lady who answers, "Who is Denki Kang?" Which I still think is funny, because it's just like so many things wrong with it. And then people have added on to it. There's like other ones. I don't have them up here. But somebody took that. Oh, yeah, and then Ares. So there was a Super Metroid competition where it was like a weekend to hack a game or something like that. And this was the guy who won. And the competition, like the people who held it, they made 7 copies of that game. That's all there is out there. And recently, I had somebody offer me stupid money for my copy. Like, I don't ever sell, but the dude offered me so much money, I thought about it. I didn't, though. I kept it, because there's only 7. I don't know who the other 6 people are, but they've never popped up. I've only seen mine in, like, 5 years. All right, so translations. A game released in another region, but not English. I talked about that. We got Akira. Look, I've got both my examples up there. Awesome. Final Fantasy 2J and 3J. And I actually asked Howard Phillips, if you remember Howard Phillips from Nintendo Power, how come we didn't get Final Fantasy 3J? Because I beat both of those. 3J was pretty good. And he was the beta tester. That one guy stopped us from getting some games. And I'm a little disappointed in that one, because that was a fun game. Not 2J. 2J is awful. Unreleased games. So I talked about that. Usually canceled project. Some of these unreleased games, there was actually a class that you could take through Nintendo, and they would teach you how to code. And at the end of the course, your like semester project was to create something. And like I said, there's people out there now that are collecting prototypes of games. And some of these prototype collectors got a hold of these student-made games, and then, made it a full release, where like they made a box for it and made nice labels and put it in new carts and stuff like that. So some of the unreleased games came from that. And then I got some examples of unreleased games. Kitty's Catch, I think, was one of the student project games. Chuck Yeager's Fighting Combat was a fully made game, but I think it was just so difficult. Like, you really had to be into flight simulators and to get a handle on the controls. I think that they just scrapped it because it was, too difficult for the normal Nintendo player. It was like advanced level Nintendo. And so it never got released until like a year or two ago. There's a group of guys who bought the prototype, and they made a run, I think, of like 100 copies or something like that. And then fabled games, like the ones that everybody talks about, Socks the Cat Rocks the Hill. This was a game made for Super Nintendo. It's about Socks the Cat. If you remember, that was the cat of Bill Clinton when he was the president. This was a game that was being made, and then I don't think they had permission, and I think the government stepped in and was like, no, you're not doing that. This exists. It's in the hand of a collector. They have actively been working on trying to release this for like 5 years at least. People troll that guy all the time. The dude's always getting sent emails saying, when am I going to be able to buy my copy? Can I buy your copy? Let me do it, whatever. And then the elusive and fabled SimCity, which there is footage of. It was at a CES show back in the day. There's pictures, possibly a video, but nobody. I haven't heard anything about that game. I'm still crossing my fingers it's out there. I really like SimCity. I would like to see a copy for the NES just to see how much different it is from the Super Nintendo version. I love the Super Nintendo version, but man, I would love to see the regular NES one. All right, so there was an art project called Clouds. This was really interesting. I can't remember. I was told that the dude lives in New York, but I'm almost positive that originally he was from Europe. He did an art project in the early 2000s. It was simply called Clouds. And what he did is he took Super Mario Brothers and he hacked out everything except for the clouds. And so it was just a cart that you popped in, and when you popped it in, it was just the clouds from the background floating by. That's it. That was all it was. And it played at like an art show in a couple different places, and you would just sit there and watch 8-bit clouds go by on the screen. So that would be other. Like I said, music carts. People are starting to do soundtracks. So there's a guy who recreated Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon, and it's called Moon 8. And it's just a cart that has, it's Dark Side of the Moon, but it's 8-bit, like it's bleeps and bloops instead of the actual musicians. You pop it in, plays all the way through. I think you can select the tracks too, but it's pretty awesome. He doesn't make them anymore, so they're kind of limited now. And then I talked about chip tuners. They let you use the NES and Game Boy to make music. Most of the times it's a cart that you plug in, and then it's got a cord running out that you would plug into like your keyboard or into a soundboard or something like that. And then the very last under other, I've got power packs and EverDrives. So if you guys are trying to collect, or if you are collectors or you're just getting into it, prices are crazy. When I started, man, I was buying lots, just people selling what they found in their grandma's attic that they forgot they had. Like, those days are gone, man. People now know that these things are worth money. It just, you look at price charting and like the graph is just going straight up. So a way, if you just want to experience some of these games, a way to do it is to get a power pack or an EverDrive. And both of those have a little slot that you plug either an SD card or a compact flash card into. You download ROMs off the internet, or you can dump your own ROMs, which I feel is totally fine. It's like making a backup of your CD. If you own it, you should be able to dump it and create a backup, because these things aren't going to last forever. Sure seems like it. I mean, all my Nintendo games still work, but at some point they are going to die out. So this is a good way to just kind of think of it as backup, because eventually all these things aren't going to work. And you can fit almost every game on like a 4 gig card, Like I got a 16 gig card that's nowhere near full, and I've got everything on there, including stuff that I beta test for. It just keeps going. All right, let's keep going. So here's Boneless. Boneless is a Game Boy cart. It was made by a guy over in Norway. Notice the code on there, -NEOR. This cart is for Game Boy, and all it does is it just plays one tone, and the tone sporadically changes. So it's just like, like that's all it does. That's totally experimental, but the guy released it. I talked with him. I'm actually the guy who made the label for it, because originally you can see it just came blank, and I thought, hey man, wouldn't it be fun to make a label? He was cool with me doing it, so there it is. Here's some other like art carts. There was a thing a couple years ago where artists would create most of them were black box kind of art labels for random things. And here's 3 of them that I purchased: Night of the Living Dead, The Thing, and you got Mad Max over there. So there's people doing stuff like that. I think if I pop those in, they play like golf, 10-yard fight, stuff like that. And then here's music carts. All these carts over here on the right, those are all soundtracks. And then Chip Maestro and the MIDI NES there, those are the carts that make music. They've got the plug. This is a new one. This is a new soundtrack that just came out, Halloween 2014, called Heebie Jeebies. It was a Halloween-related music cart for Game Boy. It was pretty cool. That was a good release. I like the little, monster Game Boy they came up with. And then here's an EverDrive for the 64. So you just pop your card in, you play all the N64 games after you download your ROMs. All right, yeah, on the good stuff. Homebrews. So these are brand new games being made, usually by one person, for an old system. So examples would be Battle Kid, based off I Want to Be the Guy. If you're into Homestar Runner, somebody kind of digged on that. It's kind of half Homestar Runner, half Mega Man. Kind of known. Oh, really? What's going on here? Battle Kid's kind of known as being like the best homebrew out there. It's super, super difficult. I love Mega Man, and I'm really good at Mega Man, and I hate Battle Kid because it's that difficult that it's like painful to play that game. Sorry. All right, back into it. Oh, and then Armed for Battle. Armed for Battle was a real-time strategy-based game. Super awesome. I was one of the beta testers for it. I really enjoyed it. If you like strategy games, you can still buy this at Infinite NES Lives. Man, it was so much fun. You make an army, people are attacking you, you got to go out and explore a land and find the bad guys and attack them. It's a lot of fun. I recommend checking it out. All right, so in the beginning, who did it first and how did they do it? So evolution of recreation. We're going to take for granted because we're now, we're in the future now, and people are kind of used to seeing a CIB release of a new game, meaning it's got a cartridge, it's got instruction manual, it's got a box. I mean, we're getting to the point now where it looks like it used to. I mean, we're basically recreating like what Nintendo was doing back in the day. And so stuff looks legit, but it wasn't always like that. I mean, it took time to get to that. And so what I'm talking about is what were people doing before we figured out, the cardboard and dimensions and the thickness of the cardstock and glossy and all that stuff. The oldest ones that I have where people weren't, because, people were just making carts, but then some people wanted to take it a step further. I want a box and manual and stuff like that. So the first ones that I kind of remember getting were the tins. And I'll show you that in a second. And see the need for completeness. Somebody who wanted everything, I didn't want to just make a cart, I wanted all there. And so then eventually we get to the CIB, we've achieved perfection, and then to infinity and beyond. Who knows what's going to happen from here? Maybe we'll just start doing digital-only releases of homebrew games and stuff like that, because that seems like where everything else is going. So here's a shot of all my tins. This is what people were doing before they started making the boxes like you're kind of thinking of. I like them. I think it's super random. Like, this is what they came up with. Hey, let me go get this tin. I'll put the label in the front and stuff like that. And you can kind of see it's a range of homebrews. I think Hoppin' Mad was another one of those student-made games through Nintendo. Double check me on all this stuff. I've been busy. I'm one of the guys who put this together, so I've been real busy and I didn't brush up on any of this. I'm off the cuff right now. So I could be wrong. Double check, but I think that might be one of the student games. All right, so the first homebrew. Oh my God! I can't believe I forgot to put this out. So excited. I just went right into it. Don't even need a microphone, but I'll use it. Okay, so the first homebrew that I know of was called Roadkill. It was sold on eBay 9/28/04. I think it sold for $60, and then it disappeared for 10 years. I had an eBay save search just waiting, like hoping, roadkill. I saw so many different things because of that stupid roadkill search. And then lo and behold, last year in 2014, somebody popped on a NintendoAge and said, hey, you guys, I bought this game at a garage sale. It came with a CD, and I can't find any information for it. Lo and behold, it was roadkill. And then I managed to finally get a hold of it. This is the only copy of this game. It's a port of Freeway for Atari, which is kind of like Frogger, only instead of a frog, you're a chicken, and you're trying to cross the freeway without getting run over. This is it. The guy who was making this game, Memblers, just got tired of it. He's a really interesting guy. I met him this past year. He's real humble. Like one of those guys where he just didn't think anything about it. He was just like, I'm tired of working on this project. He sold it. I've got the CDs with all the backups and stuff at home. There it is, man. That's the only copy of that game. It just blows my mind that thing disappeared for 10 years, and like, here it is. I can now show it to you guys in this presentation. That's awesome. After that game was a game called Frog Feast. Super Nintendo is what I'm talking about here, but they actually released it on like a whole bunch of different platforms, like Lynx and Atari Jaguar. I don't even remember like all the systems they did, but for my intents and purposes, that was Super Nintendo, and that was kind of like the next one. Oh, and then, but regarded as the father of the homebrew, because those were real limited, and like people, it was so new that people didn't even really know about them. It was like they came out, and then people kind of forgot. So the one that most people know is regarded as the father of the homebrew is Garage Cart. And I got my copy of Garage Cart over here. You can check it out. It's a combination of 3 different games on one. Let's see, Munchie Attack, Hot Seat Harry, I think, and then maybe Yar's Revenge. I can't remember what the third game is, but you can go. It's got a menu, and you can kind of go through and pick all 3 of them. So Garage Cart, it was released in June of 2006. There were only 24 made at the time. There was both PAL and NTSC. Like, there we go, 3 games on one cart. Solar Wars was the third game, my bad. It is the most expensive aftermarket game out there. The average price is $1,500. The high is $1,750 that I know. The last one that I saw sell, because they're in hands of people like me, and I'm not going to sell my copy. And so, like, once in a blue moon, one of these things will pop up, and there's no telling. I just track the last price because there's no telling what people are going to pay for these things. And what's amusing is he made 24, and at the time he couldn't even sell all of them. So like there were 1 or 2 guys that actually bought 3 copies just so the guy would sell out. They were just trying to support him, being like, yeah, all right, it's a $50 game, $60 game. I'll take 2. Give me 2. And then who knew that it was going to turn into this like whole thing that like, collectors, once they finish their license set, it's like, what do we go on to? And this is the kind of stuff that people move on to. Oh, so the interesting thing about Garage Cart is that the ROM can't be dumped. And this has to, I asked Memblers. Memblers is the guy who put this together, and I asked him, like, because I had heard like a rumor that he had programmed it some special way. Like he had figured out something so that there's no way for you to be able to dump the cart. And so I asked him like, hey man, is this true? Like, what did you do that nobody else can seem to figure out? And he was like, oh man, no, I didn't figure anything out. And then, he talked about it. It was a matter of using the cheapest possible parts, but he did get a little fancy with it. So it was a combination of the mapper he used and then just the parts that he was scrounging together. Because back then, people weren't making new boards. You can buy new boards now, but back then he was taking, boards from like 10-yard fight and then hacking that thing into pieces and then making it into what he wanted so that he could make this game. So that's the cool thing about it, because all these other games, even unfortunately Roadkill, we could probably dump that into a dumper, and once that thing goes out, what does that do to the value of these games? I mean, usually it decreases it, because why do I want to pay so much for that game when I can just go download the ROM? Now, we know that doesn't always work. Flintstones 2, Little Samson, that's a good example. But there are always people that are kind of worried about that happening. So in this case, that'll never happen, because you can't. It was, it's a weird, quirky thing that I think is kind of cool. All right, so who's in this market? Gamers versus collectors. Some of these were games that just weren't available. And so gamers want to play them, you know, like I just want to check it out. So gamers is, you know, one of the things. And then games that weren't made. So again, you get people from both of them where like, oh, well, I want to check this out, or I want to collect this. It's like, I want to play this, I want to collect this. And then there's games that are now art. So like that would be a copy of that Clouds if you could get a hold of it. I mean, to me, that seems like something that's going to be more for a collector because you can't play it. So that would be something that would be over on that side. So you got a spectrum, you know, that you're going to hit when you're releasing something. And then the newcomer resellers. So now that this is becoming more of a thing, people are no longer buying it for the love of it. Sometimes people are saying, you know, give me 2 copies. And then they sit on it for 6 months. Or they buy a copy and they wait 6 months. And then they say, okay, this game I bought $60 for, I'll sell it to you for $120. So that's, you know, that's a new thing that's taking place, is that as the market's getting bigger, people are seeing this as an opportunity to make money. I don't agree with that. I kind of dislike it, but that's just because I feel like they're taking away from somebody who maybe actually really wanted to copy that game, and they didn't get it because all you want to do is make a couple bucks. And then you sell it to that guy, and you're overcharging him, and whatever. I mean, I get it. There's markets out there. I just wish that it wasn't like that. I wish that the people who really wanted it could get it. That's all. I'm just a nice guy. That's all. All right, so the major players. RetroUSB, formerly known as RetroZone. They're the maker of the NWC Repro cart. If you've seen that, the Nintendo World Championship cart that's floating around out there now, RetroUSB is the guy who makes that. Soon to be the maker of the original HDMI NES. I say original because there's another company that flat out stole that dude's design. I don't think they're actually making it as nice as he is, because that dude at RetroUSB, he's like an electrician or something, double E, I don't know, but he's like, it has to be perfect before he'll release it. These other people, I think they're just trying to cash in, but they totally ripped off his design. It was kind of sad. He uses all new parts, new boards, translucent carts. I've got one of his carts right here. This is 8-Bit Xmas 2008. That's what kind of got me into all of this, is I saw a translucent cart, and it blew my mind. And I was just like, what is this? I don't know what this is, but I want to know. I thought I knew everything. I don't. I want to learn more. And so that was how I got into it, was this dude's stuff, what he's offering. So here's like a smattering of all my retro USB carts. You can see they're all translucent, greens, blues, reds, clears. And then he also did the Campus Challenge card. I got my gold one over there. Here's his Power Fest cart. See, you know, CIB, got them all there. So that was another competition cart. He's pretty much the only guy making these competition carts because they're really labor intensive, but you know, he'll spend 3 years getting it to work right. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, check out his website. So here we go, RetroUSB, maker of the 8-Bit Xmas cart. I got it over there. 2008 8-Bit Xmas, second most expensive homebrew. There was only 50 made. Really take that down to 49 because he has his copy, Bunny Boy, that's his name on the forum, Bunny Boy. He's got his original copy, so there's only really 49 that are out there. The last one auctioned, actually the last 2 auctioned, both won for over $1,000. I bought mine years ago, so I got lucky I didn't have to pay that. But the reason that the 8-Bit Xmas carts are increasing in price all the time is because he started this thing in 2012 where if you had every single year, he would give you something extra. You had to take a picture of your set, post it on NintendoAge, and then when you placed your order for the cart for the next year, you would get like a freebie in the mail. We never know what it's going to be. You know, you just kind of wait and then see what shows up. The first year was 2 sleeves because he makes his own sleeves now. I've got his on here. You can see it's a clear sleeve. It says RetroZone on it. But the first 2 years, 2008 and 2009, he didn't have those made yet. So that was something he had gotten around to by 2010. So when you ordered that, when you ordered 2012, like they were made by then, he gave you 2 extra for the first 2 years that you wouldn't have. And then in 2013, he did a white box CIB. So you could order a CIB that year, but it was black. However, if you had the full set, you got a white one. And then I found out later on that there were only 20 of those made. So I'm wondering if someday that thing's going to jump up in price, the white one, because it's kind of rare. And then in 2014, we got a free poster. Time Walk Games. Okay, so Time Walk was another big producer of like reproductions. They were doing a lot of stuff that wasn't released here, a lot of like Japanese games. So like the Final Fantasies that we didn't get, some of the cooler hacks and stuff that were going on, but they were going all out, making, cartridge, instructions, box, and then they got really, really good. I mean, when they were at the end of what they were doing, they really had some nice stuff going on. I mean, we're just talking like the graphics were awesome. Their boxes looked exactly like the old boxes. It was just really, really good stuff. They had a couple of neat limited edition projects. There's the Big Box Metroid redesign, and then I think, what was the other one? Star Fox 2. They did a Star Fox 2 Doom edition. It came in just like the red SNES shell from Doom. So it was just Star Fox 2, but in that shell, and I think they only made 10 or something of both of them. And then mysteriously, they shut down in December of 2013. And I mean, like, not just like they shut down, I mean, like, deleted their website. I mean, like, they, like, scrubbing themselves from the history of the internet, or at least they tried to, because if you use the Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine, you can still find some of their pages, but for the most part, they're gone. And it was crazy because they were the big guy. I mean, they had to have been making money hand over fist. Everybody knew them. They were just selling those things like hotcakes, and then they disappeared. So here's the Super Metroid redesign, the big box. You can kind of see there's another Super Nintendo regular size next to it. So think like the Earthbound release where it came with the instruction guide and stuff. I don't know what's in there because mine's sealed, and because of my brother back there, I've got issues opening sealed items. He gave me a G.I. Joe in 5th grade and told me I wasn't allowed to open it. And I still have it. It's still in the box. But that was where all my bad habits started, was that stupid G.I. Joe. All right, so Time Walk. They left at the top of their game. The company had many contributors, so there were a lot of people that were helping them design artwork, people that were making the shells and boxes and stuff for them. Some of those guys have gone on to form other companies after Time Walk stopped, like Rosecolored Gaming, who's making, that's when I'm talking about art earlier, man, the stuff those people are making, I would almost call that art. But when you go look at their releases or when you can finally see one in person, it'll make sense. Like they did an Earthbound cart that the shell was made out of wood that they stained. And it has like a hole cut in it with like the little Earthbound earth like inside of it. I mean, like, this is next level stuff where it's like, usually if you're buying one of their items, it's because you're so into that game that that's now going to be like the centerpiece of your collection. Like that's going to be something you show off where it's like, yeah, like this is the hot stuff right here. Another one of the developer or graphic designers formed This Room Is an Illusion. He's also making CIB stuff. He also does like a lot of just like art projects where you can't buy an actual game, but it'll be like, let me think of what a good example is. What was Super Smash Brothers Melee on? Was that N64? What was the first one though? Super Smash on 64. So like I think that he made a Super Nintendo box and manual if like Smash had been made for Super Nintendo. Like, so he does fun little projects like that. Or people are starting to make Game Boy. Like you could use the Super Game Boy to play Game Boy carts in your Super Nintendo. So he's made boxes for Super Nintendo that would be for Game Boy games, but as you play them through the Super Game Boy. So like, really weird stuff, but it's cool. I recommend checking it out if you're into things like that. He's got a lot of neat stuff. Check out his website. Oh yeah, so here we go. Look, I just said all this stuff. Rose-Colored Gaming, high-end games, borderline art. It's like I said, look at this, man. I'm on it. Not for the average collector. Centerpiece of the collection. All custom parts and handhelds. These dudes bought like laser drills and all that kind of cool. Like they bought some serious equipment. They're making crazy stuff. Like they did Star Fox 2, where they drilled out the eyes on Fox. And there's an LED in the cart, so when you're playing it, it like emanates like a red glow and kind of dissipates and then comes back. So like, they're doing stuff like that. Oh yeah, so here's the first Earthbound they did. This isn't the wooden one, but this was the first thing they did, where they laser etched into a cart, and then you can see the translucent. You can see my Ferris Bueller doing his pose back behind there, and then there's the little Earth like logo that's in the middle of it. So that was the first thing that they did. That was Earthbound. And like I said, I'm not really into Earthbound, but man, it's a really good looking cart. Some other interesting stuff. This is recent, within the past year. They did a game called Shadowhawk. It was an unreleased prototype for the SNES, and it was based on a comic book series called Shadowhawk. And it was supposed to be a legit release when they released it, meaning they thought that they had acquired the IP rights for it and that they could do this legally. It turns out they didn't. I'm not 100% sure what went wrong. You can Google this and you can look up the lawsuit that the guy filed against them. I think it was in California. And I think that the reason they got sued by that guy wasn't because that they did the game, but the box had comic book art on it. So it was the comic book art on the outside of the box, for Shadowhawk, and I think that's how they got sued, was they were using his art without permission. The game was fine, but not the art. And so this, as far as I know, is the first recalled aftermarket game. And the minute that lawsuit happened, the price on these things skyrocketed. So I think that he sold. How much time am I getting? What am I on?
10 minutes.
I got 10 minutes? All right. Yeah, I can finish it up. I can just quit talking. So here's Shadowhawk. It's really hard to see because it's all black, but that's the game that got called back. This room is an illusion. Oh yeah, you may not know his company, but you might know him for the Mega Man X press kit. He made the Mega Man 10 press kit. So there was the Mega Man 9 press kit that was actually made by Capcom. Is that who did Mega Man? I can't remember now. Right? Yeah. So Capcom did Mega Man 9, and it looked like an old Nintendo game. It's got goofy artwork on the front and stuff. And that was something they did to promote the release of Mega Man 9 on the Wii online thing. Well, then they did Mega Man 10, but Capcom didn't do that again. So this is the guy who was like, you know what? I want to see a Mega Man 10 press kit. So he made that stuff all on his own. Kind of known for that. That was how he got, started. Great graphic designer. Now he's doing CIB repros. And then he's got some crossover fantasy projects that I was telling you about earlier, the Super Nintendo stuff, all that. So here's the Mega Man 10 press kit. Looks exactly like the old Mega Man games. Pretty awesome. I like it. Here's his random stuff. Here's Metroid 2 Return of Samus. It was a Game Boy game, but this is a Super Nintendo box for it. Flashback Entertainment. They've got a website. They're making CIBs now. I think that they're moving from doing general reproductions to where they're trying to get into more specialized stuff, like the Legend of Link. Legend of Link was a hack that somebody made of Zelda, and they were the exclusive people to offer it. And I think that they did 50 of them, and they sold out real quick. So I think they're making more. But they're trying to do more projects like that, where it's not just basic stuff that you can get, where it's more specialized, and they're working with people to create new things. So they're pretty cool. Yeah, here's my copy of Legend of Link. Bishop Brothers, this is the guy that it was hard for me to get hold of. They got a good selection of games. They're doing new projects and stuff. It's just a little harder to order from them because I think it's just one or two guys and not responded to my email. But they do new stuff too. They did a game for Reggie off Metal Jesus Rocks. If you watch his stuff, he showed up and did a homebrew episode. Infinite NES Lives is another person that's making stuff. They're a community supplier. They're making boards, shells. They got a whole bunch of new colors. I'm not 100% sure if it's them or if they're just ordering them from China and they're just being a distributor over here. But usually when people are trying to do new stuff and use new parts, this is a place to go and get it. And they also got what's called the Kazoo, which is a board that you plug your game in and it'll dump the ROM to your computer. So it's a good way to back up stuff. And then they also are a homebrew distributor. So that's where you would get Armed for Battle, the game I talked about earlier, or Nighttime Bastards, which was another homebrew game that you can only get it from them. So there's Armed for Battle. RetroScribe. These guys are starting to get into some stuff too. They started as just blank carts on Etsy. They were birthday carts. It was just a Nintendo cart shell that said happy birthday on the front of it. That was it. There was nothing in it. But then they moved into homebrews. And they actually took it one step further where they created Blow 'em Out. And it is an actual happy birthday game where you're a guy running around trying to blow out candles. It's something that if I was going to give my buddy something for his birthday, this is a, perfect thing for me to be oh, here you go. I gave you the birthday cart. Let's play it. And then they did Beer Slinger, which is, just what is it, Tap Room? I can't remember, like the old game where, you're slinging beers. Yeah. So it's the same thing, just for Nintendo. They call it Beer Slinger. It's fun. They also do some limited editions and regular editions. So like there's a limited edition of Beer Slinger that has a different box and label than the regular one. Yeah, so here's some copies of Beer Slinger. Blow them out. Uncle Tusk. This is the guy that a lot of people get paper products from. So if you want to order boxes or manuals, or you want to work with someone to produce that stuff for your release, this is usually the guy that gets hit up. There's other people. It's just Uncle Tusk is kind of like the main dude. He also runs the Classic Tetris World Championship. If you don't know, we've got a Tetris World Championship qualifier going on over here, and it's because Tusk let us partner with him. He also was the producer on Ecstasy at Order. It's a documentary about Tetris, and it's pretty entertaining. I would say it's like King of Kong, and then I would say Ecstasy at Order. Because King of Kong is just amazing. But Ecstasy at Order is really, really good. When I wrote this, it was available on Netflix. I'm not 100% sure it still is, but I recommend checking it out. It's really entertaining. It covers Tetris and the Nintendo World Championship a little bit, too. NES City, another guy who makes paper. Usually, if Uncle Tusk isn't making something, then it's this guy. They kind of trade off. So, like, if something needs a box, if one guy isn't making it, it's pretty good bet that the other guy has it. Yeah, look, right down there. If Tusker doesn't make it, FSped09 usually does. That's his name on NintendoAge. Yeah, it's a summary. There's a kid in here. Let me go past that real quick. Let's wrap this up. We only scratched the surface. AtariAge, a place devoted to Atari games, they released something called Princess Rescue. And they actually got a cease and desist from Nintendo of America. Princess Rescue was just a even worse version of like Super Mario Brothers, but on Atari. So it doesn't look near as good, it's blockier. But you get the gist. You can still tell it's a little Mario character, and you're jumping on toads or Goombas and turtles and stuff like that. It just is a lot blockier. They totally got in trouble for that. Nintendo of America hit them up and said no. And oh yeah, and so like destroying cards for repros and the effect that might have on rarity. Some of these cards that people are making like require Batman: Return of the Joker, which in itself is like kind of an expensive game, but that board for that game is like the only board you can use to make certain repros. And so I'm kind of wondering, is this going to affect price on some of these things? Because the more games people are tearing up to make these other things, you're just decreasing the quantity. Now, granted, I'm sure they made millions of these things, but we don't know. Like, how many copies of Return of the Joker were there? So I'm curious, eventually, are we going to run into issues with that? We'll have to see. Oh, we're in a new place too, Repro and Homebrews. Somebody made a Famicom version of Battle Kid, and that started this whole debate of, like, he didn't make a Famicom version, so is it bad that somebody else wanted to make one? But he's a homebrewer, and he's still actively selling his game. So are you making a fake of his game? Are you pirating his game? I don't know. It's something that gets discussed on the forum. And then, yeah, we didn't even talk about my awesome hair. Like, there's just only so much time I can talk about stuff. My hair is going to have to wait until the next time. Resources on NintendoAge. If you're interested in any of these things that I'm talking about, you can check out NintendoAge.com. Look for my thread, the Aftermarket Price Guide. Like I said, I've got hyperlinks on everything, so you can look at the history of all these items. You can check out where they originally sold for. Sometimes you can find the original price. Gwyndian's thread, he used to do a thread for available repros. He's getting out of it. He's moving on with his life, so he's not involved anymore. That thread's still there, and some of those people are still active, but it's not a mainstay like it used to be. But there is another guy called Soul Goose, and he's doing a thread for currently available homebrews. He's usually up to date, so if you're interested in what can I buy right now that's a homebrew, you can check out his thread, and usually the first page is everything that's available right now. And then when it gets discontinued, he's got a little discontinued list. He crosses it out, stuff like that. Okay, so this would have been when I did this presentation at other places. We're actually at the Let's Play Gaming Expo. I think we delivered on everything that I was talking about at the other places. We know this is where it is, and this is when it's happening, so that's kind of pointless. And then just here's my info. If you guys want to take a picture or contact me later on, I'm Christian A. Dietering, Ferris Bueller on NA, Ferris Bueller on NA on Reddit. Vimeo.com/Christian Dietering. I make videos. I go around to conventions, do stuff like this. I'll probably post this video up there later. And then if you got any questions, Christian at letsplaygamingexpo.com. Send me an email. That's it. That's my presentation. If you got any questions, I'll be wandering around, but I think we got the next guy, so I'm gonna wrap it up. Thanks for coming out, guys. I appreciate it.
You will be here